Welcome to Doing, Being, Thinking, dialectical behavior therapy skills for making a life worth living. I'm your host, Eric Nykamp, a therapist and clinical director at the Grand Rapids campus of Adolescent and Family Behavioral Health Services, a mental health practice with campuses throughout the great state of Michigan. Hello, everyone. Welcome to Doing, Being, Thinking, a podcast exploring the what, when, and how of using dialectical behavior therapy skills for making a life worth living. My name's Eric. I'm a DBT therapist and one of the clinical directors at Adolescent and Family Behavioral Health Services. In today's episode, we're going to be talking about diary cards, which some people are like, what? Are you serious? Are we going to actually have a conversation about this? Yeah, we are. And it should be very interesting. Joining me today is Dr. Valencia Agnew, who is also the founder of Adolescent and Family Behavioral Health Services. How are you today?
Hello, I'm doing pretty good, Eric. How are you?
Yeah, I'm doing pretty decent too. Well, let's start off this conversation by just getting into a bit of a description. So what actually are diary cards? I mean, do you ever have people ask you when you are doing DBT, like, okay, what is this diary card?
I don't generally so much have them ask me what is the diary card because I've handed it to them at that point.
Yeah.
So they're looking at it and it's more of a description about how we're going to use it and why we're going to use it, as well as some options to using it that's not just paper pencil version.
Yeah. So I use apps and paper and pencil version. When I hand people the paper and pencil version, for people that have never seen a diary card, what it kind of looks like, if you ever played Yahtzee when you were a kid, it kind of looks like a Yahtzee card for mental health. And there's a big grid. There's a section where you can write stuff on some forms of diary cards. And it's a place in some ways that you can keep score on how your life's been going for the week. And there's different columns with different things that you can fill in. One that I like using has 3 sections. The first one is on actions, which is sort of like, well, why'd you come to therapy? What's the thing that you're doing that either drives you crazy or other people crazy? What are the things that make it worse? It's a place to write that down. There's a place to write down urges, which is sort of like thoughts about wanting to do one of those actions. And you can rate those on a severity scale. Sometimes we call that the SUD scale, which is almost like taking the temperature of those things and seeing if you have a fever. And so you're writing down a number, and then there's other things you can track. You can track emotions. You can track things like, are you engaging in any substances that sometimes make it better or worse for you? Other kinds of behaviors or habits or things like that. And then a place at the bottom where you can take some notes about what happened each day that these things happened. Because I don't know about you, Dr. Agnew, but do you ever have it where there's a day in your life where everything just feels like it's going wrong? And then 4 or 5 days later, things are going great again, and you totally forgot about what happened on the day that it just felt like a disaster.
Yes, that is one of my favorite parts about diary cards is the note-taking section, where I ask clients to write just enough information, not a novel, just enough information to recall what was remarkable in that day. Remarkable even when things are going well, because it's pretty easy to forget on a day when things aren't going well that anything ever went well. So the flip side of that is to look back and see, you know what, Monday went really pretty well, even though Thursday kind of stinks.
Yeah.
And I forgot about what happened on Monday. I can look back at the diary card and see I was skillful, or Monday went well, or I practiced this behavior. So I asked them to just jot a quick note down about what happened during the day, something remarkable that it's going to be important for us to touch base about later.
Yeah. I think one of the interesting things about diary cards, most people can kind of get on board with like the scorekeeping and the writing about your day piece. There's this other thing though on the backside that is kind of magical,
Yes.
which is there's this catalog, this huge catalog of skills that you learn about in DBT group, and you get to mark off which ones did you do during the day. I mean, that's the part that's the most like a Yahtzee card, is that each one that you do, you get to give yourself credit for. And then a lot of times on the diary card, you get to write how impactful was it? How effective was it in making the changes in your life with coping that you want to make? Because not every skill that's on the card is going to be your favorite skill, but you get to rate how well did it work? And when you keep track of that stuff, you're coming away with therapy gold because you know what works for you to make your life more like you want it to be.
Right. It increases self-awareness.
Yeah, it really does.
And I think of self-awareness as a superpower.
Yeah,
You know,
it really
we're
is.
aware of ourselves and we're aware of our patterns and we're aware of what works for us. It's like a superpower when you're in a stressful situation. It's like, oh, I automatically, because I've practiced this so much, I automatically know, bam, this is what skill works for me. This is what I need to do. You start to master a skill.
Yeah. And this is literally the evidence. Like you literally have evidence written down that you can look at.
Mm.
Well, let's talk a little bit about when might people want to use diary cards?
So I think sometimes that they might want to use it is again when they want to increase self-awareness on a variety of topics. Maybe it's someone that has eating patterns that are unhealthy or eating patterns that they want to change. You know, it doesn't always have to be uh, a suicidal urge. It can be other things. And that's what I love about DBT is that it can be used regardless of the severity level of what you're experiencing in life or your emotions. And so it can be that you want to you notice that you maybe have a behavior, I call them the target behaviors that you want to change. Perhaps it's the person who video games so much that they're not present for their family and they want to measure and be aware of that behavior. So anything where there's goal setting and you need to be aware of behaviors that have to change in order to achieve that goal, that's a good time to use diary cards.
Mhm. Yeah. One of the things that I listen to a lot of times is that somebody will come into my office and sit down and they are at their wits' end about something, or somebody that they care about is at their wits' end with them about something that they need to change.
Mhm.
They're very motivated, but emotions a lot of times will get so strong that it will just overwhelm them. And so their ability to cope is really lessened by the intensity of those emotions. So, anything like improving communication in my marriage, well, that's really hard to do if my emotional intensity gets so strong that I forget my plan and then I go back to my
Right.
old habit. And you can kind of imagine so many scenarios like this. I've seen people do it for like hygiene goals, eating
Mhm.
goals, home cleaning goals, as well as like the really, really like you could put it in quotes, like the severe stuff, like self-harm, suicide, substance use, some of those really obvious ones. And if it's change that can't happen fast, and it's kind of like playing the long game where you need to be able to tell yourself, I am making improvements on this, even though it's such incremental change that I might lose track. The diary card is super useful because you get to save them all up and then you can look and let's say 3 months later, and you can flip back through the pages of your diary cards and look and you're like, oh my gosh, when I first started working at this, like I rated this at a problem level of 9 or 10, like top of the scale. It was just the worst ever. Well, now I've been working at it for 3 months and man, it's been an up and down journey. I'm clocking in at 6s and 7s. Now I'm still a little bit uncomfortable, maybe somewhat uncomfortable, and it's still not where I want to be yet. But I am not hitting 9s and 10s. 6 and 7 is way lower than 9 and 10. And I want to get to 2 or 0. But look where I am now. Look where I am. I am almost imperceptibly over these last 3 months. I have dropped 3 to 4 points.
Right. I've had clients that have become aware that maybe they have a baseline of 3, where it's like that's just the norm for them. And maybe it's with an emotion that it's anxiety about, an adolescent going to school and not wanting to go to school, that they're at a baseline of 3, where it's like the urges, I want to stay home. And they realize, oh my gosh, it's okay for me to be at a baseline of 3. 3 is really very tolerable and I can still go to school. 3 is okay. But once I creep up to 5, I notice a pattern of it's hard. It's taken a lot of work for me to be able to get out the door. And if I allow it to get to 8, I'm not going to school that day, that there's nothing my parents can do to convince me to go to school once I've gotten to 8. So I really have to be skillful at 5. And that's pretty remarkable to me for someone to recognize 3 is tolerable. I can get through this without making it worse easily. I can do this. I still feel it, but I can get through it.
I think it's sort of like, I don't know if you've ever gotten pulled over for speeding.
We won't talk about that.
All right. Okay. I'm not baiting you. I'm really not. But the officer comes over and says, to me, it's like, sir, do you know how fast you are going? The diary card is sort of like the speedometer in your life.
Mm-hmm.
If you don't look at it, you don't know when you're speeding. And I'll tell you, when I've gotten pulled over for speeding, there are times that I know, and there are times that I don't know. Well, you can't change things that you don't notice. Like you could pay for some very expensive therapy, but if you have no awareness, you can't actually change anything. You're going to spend money having a conversation every week, and nothing's going to change because you don't notice during the week. If you have to write it down, you're going to develop a level of insight just from the habit of writing it down, just like you would if you were learning piano as a little kid, or if you were learning how to play basketball, or if you had to memorize lines for a school play. You have to repeat that stuff over and over and over to get good at it. Mm-hmm. And I tell you what, most human beings are going to get better at things that they do more often. Like asking ourselves, how strong am I feeling right now? Do I want to engage in behavior that's going to make it worse? Am I thinking about making it worse? How strong are those thoughts?
Right.
I had somebody the other day, they said, okay, I feel like I want to send this text.
Mhm.
Right? Okay. And I'm also like that too. Like, self-confessed angry texter sometimes.
Mhm.
He's like, it's kind of long, Eric. My text is kind of long. I'm wondering if you could read it over.
Mhm.
So we're developing some insight. So it's like, okay, well, what's the strength of your desire to send this text right now? Hadn't thought about that. It's like checking the speedometer. Are you going fast?
Mhm.
It's like, yeah, it's probably at about an 8. Hmm. Well, what do you think about that? Have you made some of the best decisions in your life when you're at an 8? Oh, no. Oh, okay. But now you notice that you're at an 8 and you want to send this really, really long text. Now that you know you're going at an 8, what do you think about that text?
Mhm.
Do you think it'll make it better, worse, or have no impact? Oh, I think it'll probably make it worse. Oh, okay. What do you want to do about that? He's like, maybe I shouldn't send the text. And that's the magic right there, right? You're checking in about how fast am I going? Oh my gosh, I'm speeding. Well, do I want to keep speeding or do I want to slow down? What happens when you slow down? I don't know, other things. I'm acting more in line with my values for the kind of person I want to be. Well, that's pretty useful. That is super useful.
Right.
Because a lot of times when we don't check in, we send those texts and then afterwards we get to feel the emotion of regret afterwards. And we're like, oh crap, I did the thing I didn't want to do and I did it again. And I always do that thing. Why do I keep doing that thing?
Yeah. Now there's consequences.
So that's what I love about diary cards. I just love it.
I like the as you mentioned about the back of it, where you get to practice skills because you may not remember all of the options that are available to you. So when you look at the back of the diary card, or however your particular card might be set up, but with all of the skills where you can look and say, is it mindfulness that I want to practice, or do I want to have interpersonal effectiveness? Do I need to
Yeah.
regulate my emotion right now, or is it distress tolerance? And so it serves as a way that you can also, in those moments where you see that you're going at an 8, that there's some skill options that you can use, but also when you're at a 1 and you can just practice the skills. You don't
Yeah.
have to be in emotion mind to practice the skills. And as a matter of fact, the more often you practice them when you're at a baseline, or, at a lower intensity of emotions, the more you will be able to access it when you are in emotion mind. Because, I'm not going to go play the piano at a recital with a whole room full of people when I haven't practiced playing the piano sitting at home by myself. I'm going to have to be able to practice it when my intensity and my emotions and everything are at a baseline and okay,
Mhm.
before I can even remotely expect to be able to play effectively in front of a group of people. So I like that the diary card gives us a chance to practice when we're fine, and when our intensity level is higher, we can then look at it and say, "Oh man, what skill do I need to use right now?"
Yeah. You're right. Practice makes improvement.
Hmm.
And this is the way of both documenting it and being able to reflect back on it. Well, what might get in the way of using a diary card for your own personal growth?
I think one of the things that gets in the way that I've seen on regular basis is that it can be or feel kind of tedious.
Mhm.
it requires taking some time, and it may not be the most fun thing to do. If you think about any goal that you've had, or at least any goals that are worth it to me that I've worked on, being able to document that goal and have the objectives and to measure those and to set deadlines or to reflect and see, am I following those goals? It can be kind of tedious, but well worth it when I achieve the goal. So I think one of the issues is the tediousness of it. And it's also why I recommend for, adolescents in particular, people that are tech savvy, to get an app, to use the DBT app, because you just type it in and they can easily mail it to their accountability person. That's a great way to troubleshoot if you're a person that might be forgetful or just not want to do it. But
Mhm.
accountability helps you have an accountability person, and you can just email it. But it also provides a graph so that you can see what the ups and downs of how you've been using the diary card. And sometimes you can't see the rewards of it right away. For someone that's working on a target behavior, and let's say maybe it's substance use, or maybe it's stalking a partner. um, and at first you look at the diary card and it's like, man, I had that urge again
Mhm.
today, or twice today. That it can be a little disappointing to look at it and not see the immediate progress of where you want to be and where you're striving to be. So I think those are two of the main things that I see is clients who have the disappointment of not seeing the goals met immediately, and they don't like seeing the urges being high day after day at first,
Mhm.
and then the tediousness of actually doing the diary card and tracking behaviors.
Yeah. I also see those kind of things come up for people. Some of the things that I notice, like if there's, sometimes I'll call them like foot dragging behaviors, where it's like, okay, I'll do it, but I'm going to do it slower, or I'm going to do it somewhat,
Hmm.
versus forgetting. Those are different strategies that you need to approach those two kinds of problems. Forgetfulness, it could be doing some problem solving around how do you remind yourself to do this thing that you want to do, or at least you partially want to do it,
Hmm.
but you just need the reminder because it's something new. Things like set an alarm in your phone, writing a sticky note that you stick on your bathroom mirror. I've had people put a note in their car,
Hmm.
or whatever memory trick you need, to do something like that. If it's reluctance or it's foot dragging, to think about, well, how long does it actually take you to fill this thing out? Like, is the amount of intensity that you feel about having to do this awful thing, is it proportionate to how bad it really is?
Right.
Because like the diary card is designed in a way that it's not going to take you a super long time to just write down a few numbers and then 1 to 3 sentences about what your day was like,
Hmm.
because it's the cliff notes that you use in individual therapy. That's what the diary card is often used for. And to think like, well, it does take me, maybe about 4 to 5 minutes. Okay. How do you feel after it's done? And most people are like, oh, I feel kind of proud of myself, or, maybe I feel like, okay, I'm doing things that I thought were difficult, and I really like that I'm starting to make changes. that kind of thing, like, well, think about how you feel after, think about how long it takes, can be very helpful in being compassionate about feeling grumpy about it or resistant,
Right.
but also that, like, really, it's not the worst thing in the world. It's kind of like up there with brushing your teeth, and taking your evening medications, maybe doing your hair. Like, it's something that it does take a little bit of time, but you feel a lot better after you do it. And once you can accept it, that, like, this is just a thing I'm going to be doing for a while, you get to free that energy up to put towards something else.
Right. I think you get to free that energy up to just get the diary card completed.
Yeah.
The amount of time that it takes to not want to do it takes longer than the actual time to do it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Well, how would you say diary cards help us make a life worth living?
When you're able to look back and see where you started from
Yeah.
with something, and then to see where you are, there's something that is encouraging about that. It sort of provides the motivation to keep going, to keep pushing forward, and it allows you to see the level of strength, your tenacity and determination, all of that internal stuff that maybe you didn't notice you had or you didn't pay attention to, that you get to look back at that and say, oh my gosh, on my worst day, I still showed up for myself.
Mm-hmm.
And if I can show up for myself in that situation, I for sure can show up for myself in this situation. And I made it from way back there when I thought it would take eternity to get to here. It's like, wow, look at where I am. And then I like thinking, I didn't get this far just to get this far. So I worked hard to get to this point, and I got it from the rest of here, because here I'm better than I was before. I'm feeling better. I'm thinking better. I have more skills. So my life is more worth living because I now have a little bit more motivation to go after what I want. So I really believe doing diary cards does help you get to living a life worth living, to do more than just exist, that you get to live and to thrive, not just survive. You get to see with the diary cards your transition from when you were just merely surviving to, oh my gosh, I think I'm thriving now. And there's more. There's even more ahead.
Yeah. Well, I hope that this episode, for all of you listening, helps you understand just a little bit more about diary cards. Hope this was actually an interesting conversation for you. I know that sometimes diary cards can feel like a chore if you've been doing them for a while. I hope this may have provided you with a little bit of motivation for staying up on that journey, giving yourself a little bit of encouragement that you've got this, you can do this, bad days don't last forever, and you've got the evidence to prove it. While it can take a lifetime to master any skill, just like filling out diary cards every day, with practice, it gets progressively easier over time. So we hope that all of you continue doing, being, and thinking in wise ways on your way to making a life worth living. Good to talk with you. See you next time. Thanks for listening. Doing, Being, Thinking is an educational podcast about dialectical behavior therapy and is not intended as a substitute for therapy. This is a podcast outreach of Adolescent and Family Behavioral Health Services, offering both in-person and telehealth therapy to children, teens, and adults throughout Michigan. If you are a Michigan resident and want to get started with therapy, including DBT, children's DBT, or other evidence-based therapies, please contact us at 616-719-0194 or find us on the web at www.adolescentfamilybhs.com.